Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's training. But my name is Abby Heinemeyer, and I'm the Education Coordinator at CCM. Before we get started today, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar is recorded, and a copy of the recording, as well as a copy of the presentations, will be distributed to all attendees, most likely tomorrow. All attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, we want to strongly encourage you to participate. You can do this by submitting questions. You'll see on the right side of your screen, you have a control panel, and there's a questions tab where you can type your questions in. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation when all attendee questions will be addressed. Also on the control panel, you'll see a handouts tab where a resource has been provided for all attendees today. Before we get started, I do want to make a quick announcement. CCM has officially announced the date of our annual convention. It's going to be Tuesday, November 30th and Wednesday, December 1st at Mohegan Sun. We're very excited. It's going to be a great event, and we're happy to have another in-person event. And with that, I'm going to hand it on off to today's presenters, starting with Patrick McMahon from Connecticut Main Street Center.
Thank you so much, Abby, and good morning, everyone. I'm Patrick McMahon from the Connecticut Main Street Center. We thank you for joining us for this session on establishing municipal cultural districts, the benefits, and the process. After an introduction to the Connecticut Main Street Center itself, we'll hear from Liz Shapiro, Director of Arts, Preservation, and Museums for the Department of Economic and Community Development, regarding the overarching goals of the Cultural District Program and the benefits of designation. We'll then turn it and dig into the steps of creating a municipal cultural district from two representatives of designated regional service organizations, Wendy Burry and Lisa Scales. We'll then turn it to Glory Norwitt, a representative of the Ridgefield Economic and Community Development Commission, to learn about the town's experience in setting up the very first cultural district in Connecticut. Joining Glory is Jeffrey Morris, another member of the commission who's available for to answer questions. As Abby said, we will then have time for questions from attendees that the panelists will answer. Next slide. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns that fuel our state's prosperity. Our role is to assess, to educate, to convene, and to advocate to develop and grow downtowns. In short, we work with community representatives throughout the state who are working to bring their downtowns back to life and to ensure their vibrancy. We champion vibrant, unique downtowns as the foundation of the state's economic growth. We build the capacity of downtowns to be place-based, inclusive, sustainable centers that leverage the marriage between economic development and the preservation and adaptation of the built environment. We provide fee-based assistance to help advance healthy and prosperous Main Street communities. Next slide. Main Street utilizes a preservation and place-based economic development strategy. The revitalization of our downtowns is built around its unique natural and built environment. Most communities have plenty of plans and studies, but often lack the capacity and organizational infrastructure to implement the recommendations. The Main Street approach provides you with the organizing structure that keeps you focused around what your unique plan is and the actions needed to implement. The cultural district designation fits our strategy perfectly as a place-based economic development strategy. Next slide. At Connecticut Main Street Center, we could not do what we do without the support of our founding sponsors, Eversource and the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, our growth sponsors, Avangrid, as well as the State Historic Preservation Office. Next slide. We have a slate of educational programming throughout the year, supported by Webster Bank, Avangrid, and the Farmington Bank Community Foundation. Next slide. We thank our corporate investors that help us do what we do: People's United Bank, Capital for Change, Windsor Federal, and M&T Bank. Next slide. We created a new strategic partnership with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities last fiscal year. I'm very pleased to announce that our strategic partnership is continuing, and it really focuses on 3 areas. Educational, they have a certified municipal official program, and our webinars do satisfy the criteria for that. Communications, we have a broad social media network as well as CCM. And so we're sharing our platforms and our programs on those to broadcast what's going on for downtowns all across the state of Connecticut. And then advocacy at the state level, both at the legislature and through state agencies. Next slide. We have an upcoming event in collaboration with the Connecticut Economic Development Association. Twice a year, we do a spotlight on Main Street. Our next spotlight will be in September and feature Coventry Village. With our spotlight events, we hear about initiatives from local officials. We then tour the downtown or village center, and then we end with some time to network with our colleagues across the state. Coventry is a gateway to the Quiet Corner, the birthplace of Connecticut's official state hero, Nathan Hale. It's steeped in history, natural beauty, and boasts a thriving arts community. Coventry Village itself retains significant cultural assets, potentially a district application coming, associated with its 18th and 19th century life as an industrial mill village. Speakers will include the town manager, John Ilsesser, as well as Eric Trott, the director of land use. Next slide. I want to alert you to our website, ctmainstreet.org. There is a ton of resources available to you 24/7. We have all of our webinars that have been recorded for our Recovery and Resilience series, as well as our CCM webinar series, are posted to our website. We have videos, very short videos to help businesses that were impacted by the pandemic, how they can increase their social media presence and some other aspects. So please go ahead and check out those videos. I am really excited to say that we, after several years, we're going to totally overhaul the website, and that will be unveiled in the coming months. So please look at our website as a resource to you going forward. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Liz Shapiro.
Well, thank you so much. And that is my first slide. And so I'm super excited to be here with you today. Let me get a chance to get set up and we'll get the show on the road. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation on the Connecticut Cultural District Program. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. We expect a lot of questions. So as we get started today, if we find we don't have time to address everyone's concerns, we will make time to speak with you or communicate with you via email over the course of the next few days. And the last slide, I think, of today's presentation is going to include our contact information. Can I have the next slide, please? So super excited to introduce our team today. Patrick, thank you. We are always delighted to be here in collaboration with Connecticut Main Street, which has been a historic partner of the State Historic Preservation Office and a new partner of the Connecticut Office of the Arts. So that is super wonderful. And I'd like to thank the Connecticut Council for Municipalities. We are delighted to be here to talk to you. I think this is a great way for our message to actually get to you and for you to be able to get back to us. So I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I am Liz Shapiro. I'm the Director of Arts Preservation and Museums at the Connecticut Office of the Arts. So in some ways, I'm uniquely positioned to pull together the arts questions that you might have with the historic preservation questions you have. I am the Director of the State Historic Preservation Office, and I like to get that out there because I know that many of you work with us in other ways already. I'm here with my two colleagues, Wendy Berry, who is the Executive Director of the Cultural Coalition, and Lisa Scales, who has not joined us yet, but will be coming soon, and she is the Executive Director of the Cultural Alliance of Western Connecticut. Next slide, please. So what are cultural districts? I'll start with a little history. Let me ground this by saying that the cultural district program is new and it is evolving to more effectively meet the needs of all of Connecticut's municipalities. So starting, just in case you all know what starting a brand new program is like. And starting a brand new program and assuming that it's going to run perfectly for everybody kind of indicates a bit of hubris. And that is not our intention. The process that we have just done of actually going through working with the Town of Ridgefield, who you will hear from, through the full cultural district soup to nuts application has illuminated a couple of pain points and places which could use further clarification. And we're going to look at these guidelines as works in progress, because if this program discourages municipalities from applying, then it is failing. So I want to have that out there. I think that's really important. The program came into fruition by legislative statute in June 2019, and it became effective as a law that October. It took a little longer for a working group of members of the Connecticut Office of the Arts, DRSOs, and Patrick mentioned them. DRSOs, as you may know, stands for Designated Regional Service Organizations. You each have one. You'll hear more about them. The heavy lift was done by my colleagues here on the call today, Wendy and Lisa, along with Diane Plock of the Arts and Culture Collaborative. What we did together is really solidify the program outline with input from our colleagues and create application guidelines. We launched this at the end of January 2020. Yay, January 2020. It was like almost the last kind of blissful ignorance time that we've all shared. We launched it and of course didn't know that life as we all know it would be changed drastically by the middle of March as the state shut down to battle the COVID epidemic. So fast forward to late winter and early spring of 2021. As we all began to look forward to emerging from the crisis, there was a renewed excitement about the cultural district program. And as you will soon learn, as I mentioned, the state welcomed its first cultural district in May of this year. Can I have the next slide? So you'll see by the definition of a district here, that there essentially is a definition. We're trying to define what a cultural district is, but a cultural district can look different in different towns. And while there are many things in common and many aspects in common, I don't want you to think of this program as a one size fits all solution or application process. And you'll learn more about that, why that is shortly. A cultural district is, as Patrick sort of indicated, it's at the intersection of arts, culture, history and heritage, historic preservation, and business. It's a distinct and tangible way for a municipality to say, we value our place, and to let visitors and residents know that this is one of the reasons why. I have the next slide. So why establish a district? So you're looking at a slide here that gives you many, many reasons why you may benefit from establishing a cultural district. And as we go through the presentation today, we'll probably touch on many of these, but if any of them are standing out to you right now that you have questions about, we'll be happy to take those questions at the end of the presentation. But, you know, so there are so many reasons, you can see that there. But one question that I know you're all going to have, and I want to answer that up front, is whether there is funding attached to being a cultural district. So right now, there is no funding specifically attached to the cultural district program. But that said, for those cities and towns that will be applying for some of the many grants that will be coming out of DECD in particular, and for those of you who may be already CLGs, certified local governments, and have made a commitment to historic preservation, for those of you who already have a robust arts and culture sector or wish to really center arts and culture in economic development, being a cultural district is an indicator that you are making a serious commitment to this work. So that is my part. And it is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Wendy Berry, who will take the lead on the next slides. Thanks.
I see Lisa, though, has joined us. So Lisa, welcome. I'm going to really quickly toss it back over to Lisa and follow our order of script. So Lisa, go ahead and kick us off on the next slide.
Okay, great. Welcome everybody. Sorry to join in late. Happy to be in on time though for my part of the presentation. So just real quickly about readiness for this application process. It's really important that cities and towns read through all of the standards and criteria, which Wendy is going to go through in some detail, but to read through what the requirements are ahead of time so that you can assess whether or not you're in a position to be able to take on the task. It's not, you know, there's nothing here that any town or city cannot get through, but there are a number of actionable steps that will be needed to be taken, like assessing your inventory of cultural assets in your community, and really taking a hard look at that. And so I don't want to go into those criteria. Wendy's going to cover it, but also confirm that your city or town is up for the task. You know, there's going to be some need to most likely reach out to your stakeholders and bring in new partnerships so that you can meet the representation standard and guideline. So there are some things that you're going to need to do. And so you just want to make sure that you're in a position to want to be able to take that on. And then finally, on the assess for readiness, if you don't already know who your designated regional service organization, you will be, be introduced to to that resource through this process that will be able to help guide you and lend assistance, which we'll go through more detail a little bit later. Next slide. And we're going to go through it right now. The role of designated regional service organization. So I don't know if Wendy or Liz actually introduced the regional service organizations, but I'll just very quickly say that the state has 8 designated regional service organizations near you. And these organizations are providing support to this application process in various different ways. The role of the designated regional will vary through this application process depending on the regional. And it can go from anywhere from being available to answer all of your questions as you go through the process to providing guidance in ways that a town or municipality needs it, to help you through the process, to provide the support that you might need in coordinating and bringing in new partners, to be able to understand the guidelines, to be able to help convene and connect with other stakeholders that maybe you are not already connected with, and to provide some recommendations for your particular municipality as it relates to the cultural district and what it is that you need to do for your community. And an example of how this varies is couldn't be more present between Wendy and I. I'm very proud to say Ridgefield is the first community to be awarded the cultural district designation, largely because they're in our region. And Ridgefield is distinguished in other ways as well. And one of them just happens to be that they have a very tight-knit group and they work very, very well together. So I'm very proud to be able to say that. But one of the benefits of that is they really did not require a whole lot of guidance on my part. Having said that, I certainly was available and we made ourselves available to answer every question that they had along the way to be able to help them complete this process. Now, for other communities, that may not necessarily be the case, and we would be equally as available to them to be able to help understand the guidelines and really walk them through the process if that's what they needed. So, and Wendy can talk a little bit more about what would be involved with that.
Yep, so hi everybody, welcome. Wendy Berry with the Cultural Coalition. We are the regional service organization. We serve all of Eastern Connecticut as of this year. We were primarily the Southeastern region, and now as of January this year, we cover the Northeast region as well. So it's all 43 municipalities on the eastern side. And our approach to cultural districts has been, as Lisa mentioned, a little different. We, being part of the team that helped develop the standards and criteria, this small group that helped to kind of pull this. And just so you know, this is we did a lot of modeling from the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a very well-established cultural districts program that's been around for years. They have almost 50 cultural districts in the state of Massachusetts, and we spent probably 6 months in discussion with the representatives from Massachusetts to learn a lot about how they did it, what the process was, and understanding the pros and cons of everything. But just know that there's a great model there. But for my organization, we saw coming out of, kind of in the middle of COVID, the cultural districts formation presented a tremendous opportunity around recovery. And so my organization made the decision that we were going to be extremely proactive in helping to support municipalities who were interested in learning more about what a cultural district was and how we could actually help you to kind of shepherd you and the municipality during the process. So while Lisa's role has been supportive based on the needs of her towns and cities, we have kind of dug in and doubled down and gone through the COG and done presentations on cultural districts. We have really tried to hold the carrot out and say this is an opportunity to pursue. We have helped to established City of New London is the second one to form, actually. So I think City of New London was here today, but they also formed, their municipality formed a cultural district just a couple months ago. And, we helped to facilitate their community input sessions. They had 3 of them. We helped to kind of continuously make sure that they had information moving them through the process. And now they'll go through the application process and we'll help to shepherd their application. So we are working with 5 municipalities right now to help them through all various stages. So yesterday, we had our 3rd cultural district information session, community input session in the town of Stonington, which is a complicated potential. It sits on a border of another state. It has 4 different villages. It spans 1 downtown mystic, spans 2 towns, you name it, it's got it. But we are taking a very proactive role in this. So every DRSO is going to vary in terms of how they support you, but just know that all 8 regionals are here to support you with whatever needs you may have. So next slide. So I'm going to walk you through the standards and criteria that were developed for Connecticut that I said is based on a lot of the things that came from Massachusetts. But here are just the basics, right? The municipality has to vote to approve the cultural district. This is a government-led initiative, right? So if the Board of Selectmen, Town Council, whatever it is, that lead, the CEO, the entities there have to actually vote to approve the cultural district in the end. So this can't be done by your artist community. It must be in the state of Connecticut. This was a question around, those that border different states and what you're going to do with, for us, it was areas like Pawcatuck and Westerly where assets cross both state lines, but it does need to be located in Connecticut. It has to meet the requirements of the definition. That was the walkable, accessible, and a few of the little pieces there. I recognize, and we can talk about this later, walkable is a big discussion and what constitutes walkable. So we can talk about that later. It needs to have defined boundaries. You need to actually be able to draw the footprint of the geographical district on a map. There's been discussion about how big, how small, how long, how wide, but you actually are going to be drawing lines and using footprint. You may already have different boundaries that are created through historic districts, different arts district that may exist. So you may actually already have footprints that may already align or actually serve as a kind of springboard for that, but it does need to have defined boundaries. It must be walkable and accessible. Like I said, we can talk about the walkable factor and what that means, and accessible, meaning who is your audience and what does accessibility truly mean? What do we want it to mean? It has to have your cultural assets and facilities, right? This is kind of the center, as was mentioned before, the center of the activities. It should have public infrastructure and amenities. These are things like public restrooms, ATMs, public benches, things that you can think about that make it possible for people to visit, be comfortable, and do what, and be able to take care of their needs along the way and be comfortable there. It's kind of the visitor welcoming part of it, and make it easy. It has to you have to have at least one community input session in order for people to learn about this. And these are publicized community input sessions. Like I said, our organization is recommending 3. And our 3 input sessions have been 1, which is a general information. We walk them through this process. The second meeting is for the creative community to really talk about what they need and what are the assets and kind of barriers. And then the third meeting brings in other stakeholders, restaurants, hotels, all of those businesses located in the district. So you're really bringing in the whole community. That's been our approach to it, but you have to have at least one community input session. You have to pass a resolution. We do have a sample resolution, and we now have resolutions from Ridgefield and from New London that can be used also as other samples to see how other municipalities are using the language in a resolution to pass it. It must form a cultural district commission, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. And we were fully aware going into this process in 2019 when we began the discussion that most cities and towns have absolutely zero desire or need to create an entirely new commission. They have a hard time filling seats as it is, and the idea of a whole new and separate commission is unfathomable. So there are alternative ways to do that. And then we'll talk more about the standards and criteria. Next slide. So these were some of the issues that we had, for example, with the town of Stonington. The cultural district, if it spans more than one city or town, so example, Mystic spans the town of Stonington and the town of Groton, both municipalities must have a supporting resolution. If your municipality has more than one cultural district, again, sample, town of Stonington, potential for 3 or 4 cultural districts in one town, one resolution is enough for all of the cultural districts if you have 1 or more. You have to have an inventory of agricultural assets that are identified in a map, and this is where your DRSO becomes really helpful. We have that information for you. We know who's in your community. That is our job, is to know what cultural assets you have, what arts assets you have, and then we work with you to help identify them on a map. Next slide. So the mapping that you're going to have to include in an application is going to map out those cultural facilities, those artistic spaces, creative businesses, historic sites, and location of cultural activities. And this includes things like town greens. If your town green is the site of an annual festival or festivals every year, that is a cultural asset. If you have, if you always have a parade that goes down a certain road and you have multiple parades, that thoroughway could be considered a cultural asset. So really thinking about events and activities and spaces and places, both built and in terms of just landscape around there. Next slide. So the Cultural District Commission. So yes, your city or town must establish a Cultural District Commission, and it may be established through one of 3 ways, keeping in mind that most towns and cities do not want to create a whole new commission. Next slide. 3 different ways. One is you actually can create a whole new board and commission just called your Cultural District Commission. You would need new volunteers, new people to serve in the commission, and it would act like any other commission that you have in town. And it would be in accordance with your local charter requirements. The second option is that you assign the Cultural District Commission to an existing board or commission, preferably an Economic Development Commission or related arts and cultural or history commission. And then you have an advisory council subcommittee that reports to that board and commission. We're going to talk about the required representation. And this is one of the, where an advisory council, you're probably maybe likely to meet that representation requirement, whereas your existing board or commission may not currently meet the criteria of representation. For example, we'll get to an artist has to serve in your commission. Many economic development commissions don't have an artist on there, so you wouldn't meet the criteria. So an advisory council or subcommittee to report to that will become the option that's best suited for you. And number 3 is the other option is just to assign your cultural district oversight to an existing board or commission if that existing board and commission meets those standards and criteria of representation that we're going to talk about next. So next slide. So this is where you need to think about your current and existing boards and commissions that may be relevant if you wanted to assign it to an existing one. But in order to have to meet the state's designation requirements, you do need to have representation from these 6 categories. And I'll just tell you that we have just updated these standards and criteria, and we've changed this because we realized that there was a bullet there that didn't make sense in terms of the discussions we're having. So we've removed one of these. So you'll see that these may potentially change over time, but right now these 6 I think are pretty firm and solid ongoing. You have to, if you have a local cultural council or an arts council, and a lot of cities and towns don't, but you should have a representative from a local cultural council or arts council, or an arts, grouping, networking, some other kind of network agency that is considered kind of like a local arts council or cultural council. You need to have a representative from a cultural organization, a historical society, museum, ethnic heritage organization, et cetera, et cetera. You need to have at least one artist that lives and or works in the district. Keeping in mind that there is, in many towns, the commission, the state statute around commissioners of commissions need to be residents of their city, town. Advisory council and subcommittees do not necessarily have that requirement. So this is, again, thinking about representation and requirements based on your own state, on your own municipal bylaws. You need to have a representative from an organization that represents artists. So this is an artist cooperative, a gallery, any other kind of arts organizations, performing arts, but thinking about one that represents artists particularly. And artists are not just visual. Think about actors and performing artists, musicians, there's literary, there's a ton of different types of artists. So don't limit your imagination to the different types of artists we have. A for-profit creative business representative, a gallery, a theater, this can be a movie theater, this can be any other type of arts organization, but galleries tend to be one of the ones that the for-profits that are in many towns and cities. And then a local business and or chamber of commerce representative. So next slide, please. And Lisa, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yep. So while I wait for the next slide to advance, I want to go back and also mention that the Cultural Alliance of Western Connecticut serves the Housatonic Valley, Greater Danbury region. So for those representatives on the call, I would be your contact there, our organization, if you need any assistance. So that's Danbury and all of the surrounding towns of Danbury.
And Lisa, can we just go back? We missed that one slide. I just want to make sure we catch that one slide. I just didn't realize this one was here before it turned back over to Lisa. So your cultural district commission is a minimum of 6, right? Those 6 representatives that we just showed. You can make it as big as you want, as what makes sense for your town or municipality. You can, and these are some of the areas where you can add in representatives of other industries and kind of cross-sector businesses to make that cultural district commission or subcommittee really robust in terms of coordination and collaboration. That includes representatives of tourism agencies or tourism-based businesses, historic preservation and history, certainly the leisure and hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, similar businesses. Those are great representatives to have there. In the city of New London, there was a lot of talk about making sure a restaurant representative was on the Cultural District Commission. They also talked about a representative of the Hispanic community and a youth representative to bring in the youth. So those are other ideas. Also your schools, your colleges, and your obviously economic development. If you have a community development corporation, you would want to have a representative. So you can make this as robust as you'd like to make it, that's manageable, but the reality is that 6 is required, but this is a great opportunity to really think about those that are in the cultural district that really should be talking and coordinating and collaborating. And that is all cross sectors, not just the arts and cultural businesses. Lisa.
Yep, next slide. So just to talk a little bit about duties and procedures of your commission or advisory committee, when you start thinking about the assemblances of this broad representation, it really provides opportunity for planning. So the whole idea is to be able to, whether you're going from economic recovery, using this as a tool for recovery, to sustainability, to growth, the commission or the committee really has an opportunity to help drive that. There is a expectation that the group meets regularly. Once it's formed and you have your district plan, the idea about, who's going to be sitting around the table, helping to make these decisions, making the decision, one of the first decisions that, how often are we going to meet? And there is an expectation that the group will meet regularly. Next slide. And here's why, you want to be able to help drive whatever the needs are for your municipality forward. And you're going to use this new commission or this advisory group to actually do that. So, from setting your goals and objectives, from an economic and quality of life perspective, to You know, how is the plan going to be managed? Being the keeper of all of the cultural assets and the inventory by way of updating your maps and your inventory list. How are you going to market your resources in a cohesive and collective way for your community? Because that's what all of this is about, right? Taking this process, having your designation, and really using it as a driver for the economy. And then also at some point, you know, we're really hoping to be able to have some good data across the state on your successes, your goals and your successes, and how you're measuring that success in your community around the cultural districts. So the expectation for this commission is to really help up-level, you know, like I said, anything from the recovery, especially coming out of this public health crisis, through real growth going forward. Next slide. Oh,
Great.
That's back to you.
So I'm going to just tack on to a little bit what Lisa just said in terms of what we're seeing on through our discussions. What we have found is through those community input sessions that we've been helping to host and facilitate, that we're getting so much information from the community about what their desires are for a potential cultural district, meaning what would be the goals, what would they want to do with the cultural district, to also what is missing and what they need and how to use the cultural district as a way to infill and actually build a plan so that they can create new things for a cultural district. So what we found is that the community input sessions are kind of providing the marching orders for the Cultural District Commission and kind of saying, this is what we want, this is how we'd like to see it be used, this is what's missing, here's what we want. And this includes everything from public art to new businesses to incentives to transportation projects, you name it. All of these things are kind of being talked about as things they'd like to do around planning and goal-oriented. But it becomes really a tool for you all to help develop a vision and then a pathway to actually achieving that vision. So, you know, we've talked about that process right there, but then we're talking about how to qualify for the state's investment of resource. As Liz mentioned at the beginning, there is no funding attached to cultural districts. And I will say, I'd like to say at this time, we're really hopeful that over time that there will be some funding and incentive for municipalities to form these cultural districts and model that off of Massachusetts, where they were funded significantly. But really right now, what you do have is some really great kind of support that you have, not just from the regional who offer marketing opportunities and a lot of promotional opportunities, and a lot of places and spaces where we can help to tout and really showcase and highlight the cultural districts in our region. But you have also the Office of the Arts, you have the Office of Tourism, all these agencies underneath DECD that are here to really help make sure that we can, as a state, highlight the cultural districts as they're being formed, give them a pathway for success, and really think about how we think about the collection of cultural districts that we have in the states. We have 2 right now. We'd love to see more, but the reality is you've got a lot of in-kind, just the Office of Tourism. You know, they have a nice little new chunk of money over there that they're going to be doing to, in terms of the budget, to work on advertising the state. And this is a great opportunity to get these cultural districts going so that the Office of Tourism and the Office of the Arts and the regionals can all work together with the tourism districts to really showcase what we have coming out of these cultural districts. Next slide. So some of these types we just talked about were recognition on ctvisit.com, right? The state's tourism website that is marketed in and out of Connecticut. Office of the Arts does a lot of promotion, and there's a lot of national opportunities, I think, here and there. We think about the Office of the Arts and the Office of Tourism in terms of the national market. The promotion by us, the DRSOs, and then our support that we offer in terms of our expertise and consulting and our work in the region to help promote cultural districts, just in terms of who we partner with, which is significant. And then other investment opportunities as they become available, such as grant opportunities and different ways to kind of get money in through our partnerships with us to help to highlight this work. Next slide. Lisa.
Yes, so what do you do with all this information once you've collected, you've gone through all of the actionable steps, you've got your packet together, you've, you know, you have your commission formed and your advisory committee formed, you have your resolution and acknowledgement from your first selectman. You collect all of the information that's required through the standards and criteria, and you send it to your DRSO. You send a full packet, if possible, to the DRSO, and the DRSO will get it to the state. We sort of are there, we'll sort of vet that package and make sure that there's nothing missing before we send it along, but that's the process. Collect all the information and material, send it to us, and then we will get it to the state.
And we can help with that. Just, like that's part of our role is, working with you to say, here's what you need, here's how we can help you with the map, here's how we can help develop all the pieces, but know that we can be a partner in that process and help shepherd that application.
Yeah, and then at that point, the state will review it vis-a-vis Liz's office or her designee, and then we'll move on to the next process, which is, and I can't tell if it's on this slide or the next slide, but next slide. Thank you. And then we will arrange, we will coordinate a site visit with between you and the municipality and the state's office. Now, what we did with Ridgefield, because of COVID, that site visit unfortunately could not be in person, as much as we would have loved to have visited the lovely town of Ridgefield. I always love to have an invitation and a reason to do that. We could not. So we did it online, and Liz did a masterful job of navigating that. But the same representatives we asked for an in-person visit was also online. So the first selectman was there, the committee was there, and representatives of the committee were there, and then the state's office was there as well as I, as the representative for the DRSO. So we managed to also do a tour because Ridgefield was very gracious in putting together a very lovely video of the walking tour, virtual walking tour of the cultural district, which we had a chance to actually review in advance. So as things open up and we're doing more things in person, I would imagine that this process will happen more and more in person going forward. But the DRSO will arrange all of that with COA, and we'll take it from there. Liz's office will take it from there.
So next slide. And keep in mind that the regionals, because the Office of the Arts and the regionals, we are all underneath DECD in some way, shape, or form. More specifically Liz, but the regionals are underneath that umbrella, as well as field offices for the Office of it. We're going to want to see, economic development commissioners. We're going to want to see your community development corporations. We're going to want to see your planners. Those are the people that we want to make sure. And who are the other influencers in that cultural district? Who are the other big players? And the opportunity for towns and municipalities with a cultural district commission or subcommittee or advisory council is really to engage new community members who have never been invited to the table, right? Artists have frequently never, arts organizations. How can you can consider them as people who have never been engaged in wanting to serve in the commission or a zoning commission, economic development? This is an opportunity to engage a whole new swath of your community to be part of this process. One thing that we've done on our side through our work in this is saying, in order to bring in new potential commissioners who have never served served as a volunteer in your town in any way, we realized that they need a little training. So we're now thinking about how to develop a little training program, kind of an onboarding for people who want to serve in a local commission, but really need to know what that means. What is FOI? What does it mean to serve in a commission? What is the bylaws? Making sure that they are ready to serve, and we could do that for multiple municipalities, because really we are looking for our municipalities to engage with people who have never been asked to engage before, because those are the voices that we want to have, as well as the influencers and the major players and all your normal kind of representatives in town. So this is an opportunity to engage your community in a new way. All right, so additional resources. So for, when we first started talking about the standards and criteria, one of the first things we all talked about, sustainable CT has really, really grown and strengthened over the past few years. We are now, this will be in 2022, creating a cultural district will be able to you'll get points for this. So we've met and sent all the information over to Jessica and the team at Sustainable CT, so that now there is an action item under the action item 3 under vibrant and cultural ecosystems. This will be an additional part so that you can get points for it, and obviously retroactively for those who already have. But this is another great way to, if you're already a municipality municipality engaged and participating in sustainable CT, you can get credit for this work. Next slide. And also that point on that one is those community matching funds from Sustainable CT. If you form one and you need money for a planning grant or need money for community input sessions or you need money, what a great way to utilize the community match program, get a grant for this work and do some assessments and data collection, whatever it is, planning once the commission is seated, but you have the opportunity to go get a community match grant to actually get some money to do some of this work. And we realize that funding is something that may be really helpful to get some of this work done, especially around marketing and promotion and data and collection. Additional resources, obviously, from the Office of the Arts, the State Historic Preservation Office, Connecticut Humanities as well, the Tourism District, Sustainable CT, the regionals, you name it. We're all here to try to make sure that if you all want to consider exploring a cultural district, that you have the support to both explore and potentially say this is not the right fit, or to move forward and keep going and have you help you get all the way to state designation.
Can I just jump in for 1 second, Wendy? One of the things that I just wanted to add about this slide is that through the process, you are going to get to know more people who represent different organizations, and all together we create this ecosystem. So some of you may have worked with Brown, you may have worked with the small business portion of DECD. But one of the great things about the process of forming a cultural district is that we have relationships within DECD, which now we can sort of coalesce, and we have relationships outside of DECD, like with Connecticut Humanities. So a lot of the work that goes into developing a cultural districts, the benefits might kind of be more of a trickle down in that you know more people at different levels who can help you to get the right answers to your questions and steward your projects in a more effective way.
Yeah, if I can also tag on to that point, because there's a lot of municipalities in our region that may not meet certain other criteria, but the process of developing a cultural district by way of bringing in people in your community that you would not otherwise bring together, starting that process could have its own rewards in getting to a position where you can develop and meet other criteria, like, you know, incentivizing and planning on how to bring in additional resources, cultural resources to your community. So I just wanted to point that out because sometimes funding comes, you have to plan before the funding comes. And so starting this process of collaborating and partnering and planning, you know, could go a long way.
Great, so I think we have the last slide next. Great, so this is just more information. I think this will be at the end as well, but also just as we close out kind of our presentation, know that, you know, my organization has been involved now in I think 9 community input sessions in different towns, each one creating a whole new set of questions and a whole new set of opportunities and a whole new set of kind of feedback to bring back to the state to discuss around what's working, what's not working, and how can we remove any barriers to create a cultural district. But this, as Liz said in the beginning, is an evolving program, and looking forward to having that feedback to help shape it and seeing how this is working and how it's best serving you all. But really great discussions, even if you choose not to have and form one. The discussions that you're going to have in your community are really interesting conversations, especially around recovery right now. And so I encourage you to at least consider what that might look like for your town. So I think that's it for our team.
I think then I'm up. Hi, I'm Gloria Norwitt. I'm a commissioner and the secretary of the Economic and Community Development Commission in Ridgefield, and I'm here with the chair of the ECDC, Jeffrey Morris. Hi, Jeffrey. And so we could jump to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about what we did, just the steps that we went through in order to get our cultural district designation. It may be a bit repetitive of what's been said, but I thought it might be helpful since we did it, just to talk you through step by step, you know, practically how we did it. So the first thing you have to do is just look at, do you have a lot of cultural assets in a defined area? A lot of towns have lots of wonderful things, but are they all in a walkable and accessible defined area? So we're lucky in Ridgefield that we have a downtown that is just filled with cultural assets. So we just sat down and started writing everything that we have in our town, whether it was physically a building or festivals or events. And we definitely have some that are outside of our cultural district, but because of our downtown area, we went for a cultural district that was a little bit larger than our downtown. So that we made this map. That was essentially our first step. We made an inventory of our cultural assets and facilities within the cultural district and assets nearby. We did an inventory of public infrastructure and amenities within the cultural district. So that was like electrical vehicle chargers and playgrounds and restaurants. Then we did an inventory of other notables within the cultural district, including cultural activities such as the festivals, the concerts in the park, our Ridgefield Independent Film Festival, athletic events we have like 5-kilometer runs. And all of these inventories are things that we listed out in our application regardless. So we needed to do it just to figure out if we have a cultural district, but also, these were long lists that we put inside of our application. And then when we did that application, we also added in paragraphs to describe our key organizations and businesses. Like we have the Ridgefield Playhouse. Well, what is it? And we defined how, and stated statistics, how many people they have attending per year, how many guests coming in, how many ticket holders. So we did that for probably 10 or 15 organizations and businesses. We contacted them, asked them for a write-up, asked them for their statistics, and included all of that. So on the map that you can see, we put on there quarter-mile markers to show that things are walkable, things are pretty close to each other. So it goes from the bottom at a boutique inn and a museum, a quarter-mile away from that is another museum, etc. And so it shows that it's walkable and accessible, and it shows that it has defined boundaries. And we'll go on to the next slide. Since we internally at the ECDC decided that we had a cultural district, the next step was making sure that the town would want this. So we had an initial meeting with our first selectman to say we would like to apply for this, and he was completely on board immediately. We sent a letter of intent to our DRSO right away saying we would like to be in this process, and our DRSO had a initial meeting about this in December 2019, right after the law had become effective. Our process went from December 2019 to May 2021, so it was a year and a half. It certainly does not need to be that long for other organizations. COVID really slowed down our process. And I think it might have been a little bit slower too, because we were the first town applying. And so, we were everyone was figuring out how this process was working, and we all had to chat a lot. But it was really wonderful, and I think it all made it a great teamwork for all of us. So after we talked to our first selectman and submitted our letter of intent, we went to our Board of Selectmen in a meeting, and official meeting, and asked them if we could form an advisory council subcommittee. That's one of those 3 models in the slide they had earlier. It was the second model where the advisory council subcommittee worked with and replied to the ECDC and fell under the ECDC. And then once we had the approval to have an advisory council subcommittee, we went out and formed it. So we had, just like that, they showed the list of 6 categories of people. We had people from the town, which was our Board of Selectmen, and from our ECDC and our Historic District Commission. We had a cultural organization, well, several of them. We had our Historical Society and 2 museums. We had an artist. We had a group representing artists, which is our Guild of Artists. We also had our Arts Council, had a member on our subcommittee. We had our for-profit creative business, which was a media company in town that ran a Ridgefield magazine. And then for our local business, we had our boutique inn, which is in the cultural district. And what we really want to promote with our cultural district is not just to come to Ridgefield for a day, but you can also come to Ridgefield for a whole weekend, because we have so much to offer and we have this great boutique inn that you can stay at. So after we had our subcommittee formed and we met with them and everyone was extremely excited about the application, we held a public hearing. You have to have a community input meeting. So we decided to have it a public hearing as part of a Board of Selectmen meeting. So we put out notice, the Board of Selectmen has to put out notice of what their agenda is for upcoming meetings. So there's notice that way, but we put out some press releases, got it on all of the local websites, on Facebook and things like that, and said, we're having this community input meeting, please come. So we went to the Board of Selectmen meeting. We actually got no questions other than from the Board of Selectmen. Everyone was very excited about it. So we explained everything to the Board of Selectmen, introduced our advisory council subcommittee members who were all there to answer questions. We had also invited reporters. And so we explained the whole process, had no problem. So during that same meeting, the Board of Selectmen passed a resolution. And then subsequently, I got the minutes from the Board of Selectmen meeting, and those minutes became part of our application. So we had not just the resolution, but the Board of Selectmen minutes in our application. And then if we could go to the next slide. So our next step was the actual application. This was our cover letter, but if you look closely, you can see our application was about 25 pages. When we put in our inventory lists, when we put in, the Board of Selectmen minutes, when we put in our letter of endorsement from our first selectman, we basically just went through all of the steps that are on the CTGov portal and put everything into one document, our zoning regulations, and we even had some good press coverage after our Board of Selectmen meeting from the community input hearing. And so we included the Ridgefield Press newspaper article to show that the town is really excited about this and everyone would really love to get the cultural district designation. And then next slide. So our next step was the site visit. And as Lisa pointed out, unfortunately, we couldn't have an in-person site visit due to COVID. So she had made the suggestion, let's do a virtual one. And so we just went with that, because what else are you going to do in COVID? So we made a video. Jeffrey was great getting someone to literally ride a bike through the cultural district so that it would go a little bit faster. And you saw every single cultural asset that's within our cultural district. And we didn't do a voiceover or anything, because during the site visit, the virtual site visit over Zoom, where we showed this 5-minute video, we just did a voiceover ourselves during the meeting and had prepared for that. And this video is great because now we can use it and put it up on things if people would like to see all the assets and understand, what our town is. And during the virtual site visit, just like the requirements show, we had our first selectman on the call. We had all of our members of our advisory council subcommittee. We had Liz from the Connecticut Office of the Arts. We had Lisa from our DRSO. And then we had Jeffrey and myself from the ECDC, because we're the applicants. And then subsequent to this virtual site visit, we did an addendum to our application. This was, I think, really because we were the first applicants and the process was really being worked out. We were asked to provide some more information. So we provided a list of all of the town committees and commissions that will be interacting with the cultural district subcommittee and their town budgets. And then we also submitted some more maps that showed all of our historic districts within Ridgefield, not just in our cultural district area, but anywhere in our town. And then the next slide. So in May of 2021, just a few months ago, we received our designation. Everyone was very excited. So you want to kind of get some bang for your buck. So we said, let's promote this, and said, let's have a ceremony celebrating the designation. So we were very lucky. We invited the governor to come to our town, and he was very willing and very excited. So we had a lovely event outside one of our wonderful cultural assets, the Aldrich Museum of Contemporary Art. It was a little hot that day, which you can probably tell from the picture. But we had about 70 people outside, kind of spread out. And we had the governor, we had all of our advisory council subcommittee members, we had guests from all of our cultural assets that are within the cultural district. We invited a lot of press, and we had, print reporters, but also video reporters there. We had our Board of Selectmen, our members of our ECDC, and it was a fantastic event. We passed out press kits during the ceremony. So any cultural asset within our cultural district, we had invited them to give us pamphlets. And we just said, we asked the library, could they collect pamphlets? So we just put a big box at the library, said, any cultural asset in town that wants to give us pamphlets, give us 50 of them and put them in a pile. And then we made 50 different press kits with all these pamphlets. And we got about, I think 25 or 30 businesses and organizations to give us pamphlets. So that was a great press kit to put together anyway. And then at the event, we had the poster that you can see here, which is the poster of the cultural district logo. We were very excited. One of our artists in town created the logo, and the Connecticut Office of the Arts approved it. So that was really wonderful. And then we also had separate another poster, which was an illustrated map of the cultural district area. Luckily, we had a store owner put together an illustrated map of all of Ridgefield a few years ago. So we took that illustrated map and condensed it down just to our cultural district and passed out those as well. We did a press release before the event, I think a press release after. So we're just trying to get the word out about our cultural district as much as possible. And then after the event, there were many articles written on the state level, on various local levels and regional levels. So it was really wonderful. I think the word really got out about Ridgefield. We put it up on the ECDC website, which is the site you can see here. And our next steps are we're creating signs, which is a requirement. We're creating signs to go on the road that shows when you're entering the cultural district. So it'll, right on the side of the road, it'll say you're entering the cultural district now. It will have our cultural district logo, and we're in the approval stages for that because it's within a historic district, et cetera. So we have to get various local approvals. We have also just made a window cling, which is the cultural district logo, and we're distributing them this week. We already distributed 70 yesterday, and to any business or organization within our cultural district. And we also made a uniform statement so that any business or organization can put it on their website. So it's a nice little blue box that looks like the cultural district logo you see here, but then underneath it, it has a statement that says what a cultural district is. Ridgefield got the first cultural district designation, and our business or organization is within the cultural district. Businesses and organizations that are just outside of the cultural district but still within Ridgefield can put it on their website as well, but it says we are nearby the cultural district. But we thought a uniform statement, it was actually a suggestion by some people in our subcommittee. We thought it was a great idea just so that everyone's putting out, a nice uniform statement. It all looks consistent. It all looks really professional. And then a later step is that illustrated map we had done of the cultural district. We're going to redo it, put on some more details, and keep promoting it. But everyone's been really excited so far in Ridgefield and is very eager to get the word out. And we're hoping this really does a lot for tourism in our town. And Jeffrey, I don't know, I think that's everything for me. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, thank you, Glory. The only thing I'd say a little bit about the application process, I mean, it's very thorough, but it's not daunting. You really need to assess what you have and if it's really a cultural district and sort of who contributes to it and all that. So the application process is really effective in that way. But I didn't nowhere along the way did I feel like we were doing anything that was unnecessary. Like, why are they asking us to do this? And the other thing about it is that it really brings your community together during the application process, because we have a bunch of cultural organizations and we all meet pretty regularly, but we've never actually said on a piece of paper, like, look at everything that we have. Each group promotes itself. ECDC promotes the town and what's going on. We've never really put it down onto a piece of paper, onto a map, labeling everything. And so it's a really good discipline. And it's, so it's one of those things, like, what you have, but once you give it a name, it elevates it a little bit.
I completely agree. People were very eager to not just say, go to the Ridgefield Playhouse, but we have a great town. Come to the town, go to the bookstore, go have a nice dinner, and then go to the Ridgefield Playhouse and see a show. Like, people really wanted to put it together as a package. And we're very lucky that Ridgefield has that package that we can promote. But people were very eager to work together, and it will make everybody successful.
I'm going to start off with some questions to Gloria and Jeffrey. It's my understanding that representatives from Ridgefield were actually the impetus behind the legislation, the original legislation. Yeah. And so what was the intent? Why did they pitch this? How did they hear about it from other states, and why did they want to establish such a program here in Connecticut?
It was actually the owner of our local bookstore, Books on the Common, Ellen Burns, had gone to Massachusetts to visit a friend. And while she was in Massachusetts, she learned about the cultural district program there. So she came back home and talked to our state representative at the time, John Fry, and said, Massachusetts got this great program. I think Connecticut could really benefit from it as well. And so John Fry jumped on it and wrote the legislation and really promoted it and got it passed.
That's awesome. Now, I know Liz had a slide that showed the benefits of the program. From Ridgefield's perspective, what do you see as the benefits that are going to accrue to your community because you were the first municipal cultural district?
Jeffrey, you want to take it?
Yeah, as I said before, it helps define what you have. So that's one thing. So you can then say, hey, we have all these really great things, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, we are a state cultural district. And it's just easier sort of to say that. It enables us to put up, at least 2 signs at either end. We'll probably put up more. It has the window clings, so that promotional thing. But I think as more towns and cities get the designation, then the state will put more muscle power behind identifying it and promoting it and saying, hey, look at all these great cultural districts we have. Go to Ridgefield, go to New London, go to all these other places. And so, there's that. And then we also have this committee of, I forget how many we have, whether it's 8 or 10, who will be meeting regularly and talking about our cultural district and how we can promote it and improve it.
And after we got the designation, all those things that we did, the uniform statement, the window cling, those were all suggestions from our subcommittee. So, they're really helping us to figure out how we can promote this. And so I think the more creative, artistic people you have involved, they have great ideas, and we all come together and can really push it forward.
Oh, that's great. For attendees on the webinar, if you have questions, please put it in the question box, but I'll continue to go forward with some other questions here. Wendy, you mentioned in Stonington the possibility of 4 different districts, and I could see that in some other communities as well. Do you need to establish a separate commission for each one of those districts? What's the mechanism if there's going to be multiple districts in your community?
Yeah, I don't think that's been answered yet, actually. I think you need to, so that we haven't seen any municipality that really is talking. I mean, Stonington has the option of potentially 3 sites, realistically 3. I don't think there's any desire right now to have 3 of them formed right now. The feedback is that 1, being the hub in the town, could serve as the center, but coordinate with all the other villages, right? That they really don't need 4 of them. But I want to just add into some of the discussions that the opportunities around this based on that kind of idea where you have a town that has 4 potential sites, right? So in Stonington, some of the discussion has been the duplication of where organizations are doing the same thing. There's not any communication. It's around collaboration and coordination. And they've talked about kind of duplicative services and organizations in town where they're not talking with each other. There's these silos because they're in different villages or even in different footprints of different organizations. So the discussions that are coming out around duplication and voids in the ecosystem, where are the voids that need to be infilled? And it's coordination and collaboration of everything from events and activities and organizations and planning and marketing and branding. All of those things are coming down to, are they all at the same table? Have they ever been invited to the same table? Usually there's not. We had a great discussion about the issue of trust in the community in terms of collaboration, because it's been really competitively based around, really thinking about, is my business going to be able to succeed and capitalize? But is there coordination and collaboration? Not as much, because there's a competitiveness around dollars, right? And so there's just really raw conversations around how to actually do things town-wide, and thinking of the cultural district as the middle of the wheel and other areas outside as being kind of spokes to it, right? That they're still connected, they're still part of it, and they should feed off of each other, right? New London, Ocean Beach is not in the cultural district, but it certainly is a major cultural asset, and they should be connected to the cultural district and talking with them. The other thing I just want to raise, and just to kind of get some creative juices flowing for you to bring forth some of the things that are being discussed around cultural districts. They're talking about cross-sector discussions at that table. And these include tourism discussions, housing discussions, right? Is there housing for artists, and is it affordable? What housing do you have? What housing do you need? Public health and human services. How are artists in the arts community being embedded right now in the public health crisis? And how can a cultural district be a conduit to that? Beautification committees. If you're working on bus stops and shelters and bike racks, why not have the artists think about how that looks consistent and what's the brand that your community is putting out there? And maybe an artist-centered bike design and trash can design and utilitarian objects is going to be much more unifying than no offense to any of the DOT people and any of the Department of Public Works people, but I'm sorry, an artist can make it look cooler and better, and it'll match the brand that you're putting out there. Your technology companies, signage and branding. We've talked a lot about how you can really think about, if you have a business located in the cultural district, how can you recruit employees based on you're going to live or you're going to work in a place that is a cultural district. That's an employment recruitment tool. And retention tool. So think broadly about workforce development, technology, transportation. Really open yourself up to ideas of how a cultural district can drive discussion around planning for that area. I totally didn't answer your question, Patrick, but I really wanted to throw that all in there.
That's outstanding information for everybody on the session. So you had sort of teed this question up earlier in your presentation, Wendy. So Wendy and Lisa, from your perspective to date, this walkability question as to the definition of that, where's it stand?
Yeah, so we had to go look at Lisa's. We had to go pull up Ridgefield's and say, what did Ridgefield have on theirs? And we pulled up your map and we said, let's get, because we were talking about it in Mystic of, we have 4 villages. What's the distance? The distance between 2 of the villages is 1.2 miles. Is that walkable? And there's been discussion, and I think this is actually a discussion that needs to continue to evolve, because walkable based on children, elderly, accessibility, the discussion recently was, if you don't have a walkable area right now, can you use this cultural district to create a walkable area? How can you use this as a planning tool to make it walkable? So Lisa, go ahead and talk about your side, but ours is up for discussion.
Well, I think ours is too. Ridgefield is probably unique in our region in that the district, it's a little over a mile, right, Glory? Is that what you showed in your map? It's a little over a mile, if I remember that. But there are quarter-mile marks. And so all of the assets, first of all, the sheer number of assets, we're looking at what, 15, maybe upwards of 20 assets in such a small town. So it's kind of unique that way for our region. But the fact that they're kind of situated within that 1 mile. So 1 mile of its own to get to, a district might not be, like if cultural assets and facilities and amenities and places where arts happens, if they're far apart, that might cause some questions for a community to say, does this meet the criteria? But when you have quarter-mile marks in a municipality with that many cultural assets, it becomes a lot clearer. But I do know that for some of the other towns that are in our region, that's a question. And there are some beautiful assets that, are available in places like New Fairfield and Brookfield and Newtown, for example. So I think that we're also, that question is still evolving for us.
I'd love to jump in and just comment on that because, for me, like, it's very intuitive, I think. The Las Vegas Strip, right, just jumped into my mind. You wouldn't call that more than one cultural district, although you could call it a 5,000 cultural districts. But if you've been there, if you walk the Strip, you are exhausted at the end of walking the Strip. It is very, very long, but the Strip works together to create a unified story for the town of Las Vegas. And it's very different from old Las Vegas. So I just think in thinking about how you're conceptualizing cultural districts, definitely you could have more than one in your town. And I think it could be argued in our cities, especially in the more densely populated urban areas, that each of those cultural districts could be really reflective of neighborhoods and really could require different kinds of advisory councils. But again, the idea that once cultural districts are created, that they are working together to send a unified message to whatever municipality is they're located in is the critical piece, because we're looking at mechanisms to speak in a more powerful, unified voice that represents everybody in a municipality.
Honest thought about not having the pedestrian infrastructure completely in place and then using this as almost a planning tool. There are some resources that municipalities should be aware of. The community connectivity grant program through DOT could be helpful here. The small town economic assistance program. Every community in Connecticut right now has gotten an allocation of American Rescue Plan Act dollars. And I know that Wendy and Lisa, you might want to mention your initiative relative to that, but that could be a source of getting some new sidewalks in these incredibly important locations. Go ahead, Wendy. Mention what your pitch was for ARPA funds.
And I'll also say that one of the towns or municipalities we're working with doesn't have public restrooms, and it's been something that's been long sought after. A cultural district just could become leverage for them to actually get them now, right? So they're going to use it as potentially as a tool. Yeah, every municipality that's on the call right now, your town, your first selectman or mayor has been asked that your ARP dollars, hopefully, have dedicated in them at least 1% of your ARP funds to go to arts and culture. So this has been a statewide request. I know in our region, we're seeing it actually start to kind of come in. Norwich came out with $500,000. They're going to be utilizing our organization to help administer that funding. Stonington, quite a few of the towns, but Hartford has committed, New Haven has committed, many towns across, but at least 1%. And that really is a realistic and certainly small ask in terms of what the return on investment is from your arts and cultural community. But we are hoping that as many municipalities as possible dedicate at least 1% or more. We're seeing 4 or 5% in some cases go to arts and culture, and that's putting the money right back into your local community to help support that. And, this sector has been devastated by arts and culture, and your cities and towns are feeling that because you don't have those events and those activities and all of those things and hotels being filled. And we're going to help bring back your cities to really being vibrant communities. Cultural districts is a way to accelerate that. But that 1% is a real good commitment we'd like to see at the municipal level.
For the communities that are smaller, or rural communities that may just have a sort of a village center and don't have the staff capacity per se to do the mapping? Where can they turn? Can they turn to their cogs for like the GIS mapping? What do you sense in those smaller communities?
I can jump in before I let Wendy talk, because Wendy and Lisa have been in the trenches, but I can speak. I lived in the town of Sharon, Connecticut for millions of years, which is no more than 3,000 people. So, and everybody like every commissioner feels like they're serving on, another commission. And it was an easy lift to map the cultural assets, and Sharon has a lot of cultural assets. So I wouldn't necessarily, just because you haven't done it and thinking about it seems overwhelming, get a couple people at the table, spend an hour doing it, and you will have them, you'll be 90% of the way there. And I'll let Wendy talk and talk.
Well, I'm just going to remind people, don't forget your DRSO, also. So your DRSO can help walk you through a lot of this, including getting the cog at the table if necessary, and helping with the development of maps and all sorts of things. So if you're small community, small resources, that's what the DRSO in your community is for. And so I highly encourage that you reach out.
And we have that information. In most cases, we have the information. And I hope that also one thing I want to kind of impart is that, we think the DRSOs and the Office of Arts, we think of the creative economy as probably bigger than what you're thinking. So when you go to do your mapping, we're thinking about the architects, the designers, the graphic designers. There's some question about tattoo artists and whether tattoo artists should be included or not. But the reality is, our definition of creative economy is much broader than you probably realize, and there are probably more cultural assets in your city or town than you realize. We have the definition that we use as a filter, and it is pretty expansive in terms of the creative economy, not just arts and cultural and performing arts centers and dancers, but think about the musicians that live in your town. Think about the artists who have studios. Think about the architects. Think about the designers, the freelancers, the home-based businesses, the crafters, the artisans. It's a really big definition. So you probably have more. We're here to help you with that. There are a lot of free tools out there these days around Google Maps and thumbprints, and we just need addresses and we plug them all in, and Google Maps will do the work for you. We also have GIS capability with your municipalities. There's a lot of great tools. It's not that hard to do, and certainly in the rural areas and smaller towns, it is technically usually a little bit easier of a job to do than it is in the city centers.
Yep.
What do you see as the role of, say, churches and universities in some of these districts?
Yeah, what a great question. I'll let Lisa and Liz add to that. You have to consider your churches and your religious who have concerts, who have festivals, who have fairs on their grounds and inside. Absolutely being part of the choirs that sing there. I mean, a lot of activities in terms of culture take place, especially in your churches, and certainly the colleges. They have performing arts centers. They have student groups. They have arts activities. They have arts students, right? I mean, you should be thinking about all the different ways, and they have interns. And they have people who can help with this stuff. So mapping, you've got college students, you've got a college campus in there, you've got access to little economists and little, potential, kind of planners out there. And what a great opportunity to include them in the process and get them involved and get their perspective. So tap into every resource you can.
Yeah, same thing with libraries and all of the events and activities that happen through those institutions. And, for larger areas like Danbury, for example, the cultural centers in groups, and all of the different events and activities that come out of those organizations also, should be listed and inventoried.
And those are the, we have Hispanic Alliance, we have the Dominican, in Norwich alone, there are a ton of cultural groups. Your NAACP should be at the table. These are the cultural groups that you want to have at the table who are bringing out people you've never probably met before in some cases, but absolutely contribute to the culture of your community and the diversity of it.
Yeah, and I think Jeffrey said it best, going through that discipline, that level of asset mapping and just inventory is just a good one to have in defining your community and really adding, even more weight to a singular message about your community.
So we're coming to the end of the session. I want to give each of you one last opportunity for last thoughts on this topic.
I'll go first then. I'll go. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Jeff, you're on mute though.
Jump in real quickly and say, you know, it's a really great process. Just the process of going through it is worthwhile. And then having the cultural district designation, you get a good feeling about yourself in the community. I mean, once we received it, it was like, hey, we got this win. It's really great.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It really brings the town together.
Go ahead, Glory.
I was just gonna say, it really brings the town together, and it really builds excitement. And after COVID, I mean, can't say after, but you know, it's nice to have some excitement and some positivity and everyone coming together for this.
Yeah, and I know you all have heard.
Oh, go ahead, Wendy.
You've heard different approaches too. You've heard that I think that the formation of an advisory council kind of before the committee input sessions, whereas we're doing input sessions before the kind of formation of them. That's the flexibility I think you have in terms of what you know is going to work best in your town. But couldn't agree more with Jeff and Gloria that the process is the exciting. I mean, this really is where I think especially on the recovery side, there's so many opportunities to help get some funding for an effort like this. It's needed right now. These organizations have been siloed for 18 months and working in their own. They need to know that people have their backs and to know where they can add value to your town's goals and plans, right? So this is just the process in itself is a fantastic process. Lisa, I saw you.
I just want to emphasize everything that's been said already, and particularly for those that are on in the meeting today. If you don't think that your community would necessarily meet the criteria, or if you don't feel as intuitive as Liz pointed out earlier, but to use this as an opportunity to get there. I think it's an important point to just really emphasize that this is a now moment. To really take a step back and see how this can work for you, and use it to strengthen your community around arts and culture and the economy.
Liz, would you like to add anything?
Sorry. You know, I think that my colleagues here at the meeting today really said it best when they said, don't be afraid to start the discussion, because the process, it looks more daunting than it actually is. And even having the discussions about whether this is possible and reasonable and right in terms of timing for your municipality may lead to other kinds of discussions that would be beneficial. So we're all here and ready to help you to the best of our ability.
Thanks, Liz. On behalf of Connecticut Main Street Center, I want to thank all of the panelists and our support at CCM. This is really exciting times with the establishment of these municipal cultural districts, and I hope more communities go through the process and work with your DRSOs and get them established. So I'm going to pass the baton back to Abby at CCM, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and thank you to all of our speakers today. This is fantastic information, and we really appreciate all the time that you put into it. And I also want to thank Patrick McMahon and all the staff at Connecticut Main Street Center. We always love putting on these trainings with you all. They're very valuable. Again, this webinar was recorded, and all attendees will receive a follow-up email with the materials. If you do have any questions, you can see our presenters' contact information right here on your screen, but it'll also be included in that follow-up email. Thank you again to everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.